welcome back to my channel. Today I have a very interesting video for you. The video is how to set up your rifle dies on a single stage press. Recently I've had a lot of comments and questions and concerns about how do you set your dies up. So hopefully I'll answer those questions in this video. I guess the first thing I want to say is people often ask me, okay, for example, I want to load 30-06. I want to load this bullet, and when I'm looking at the store or wherever you're going to buy your dies, they're looking and they see that the manufacturers offer sometimes a 2-die set for rifle, and some other, they might show a 3-die set for rifle. And they ask me, well, what's the difference and what do you recommend? Well, my recommendation is very simple. When you reload rifle ammunition or any ammunition on the single stage press, your objective is to get the least amount of press strokes per round. So, my recommendation is get the 2-die set, because the second die will do 2 operations for you. If you had a progressive press, then I'd highly recommend the 3-die set for rifle. But in our case, we're going to be using a full-length die set by RCBS to do the 30-06. This set will come with 2 dies. It'll come with your decapping die, which is noted by the decapping pin. This die will do 2 operations. It'll full length resize the case and it'll knock out the old primer. The second die in the set is the bullet seating die, which can also be used to crimp the bullet. I'm going to break this video down into 3 sections. The first section I'm going to talk about will be how to set up the decapping die, decap and resize the case. The second section will be how to set up the bullet seating die for bullet seating. And the third and final section will show how to take that bullet seating die and establish a crimp on your bullet. So I hope this information is useful, and stay tuned. Okay, so now we have our press. First thing I want to do is I want to take my shell holder and insert it into the press. I'm going to take my decapping die, or my resizing die as it's commonly referred to, and I'm going to raise the ram all the way up. I'm going to thread the decapping die downward until the die body touches the shell holder. Once it touches the shell holder, I'm going to lock the die lock ring. This will lock the die into place, and that's all there is to it. From here, I'm going to take a previously fired case, and that's noted by the dent in the primer from where the firing pin hit. It's already been lubed. I'm going to insert it into the press, raise the ram, and I don't know if you could see it, but the little primer flew. And so I just did 2 things right now. I did a decap, which I knocked the primer out, and I resized the full length of the case. Now on the downstroke, it's going to do a third thing, and that is you'll feel your press will kind of get caught right there on the downstroke. The purpose of that is so that when you go down with your press, that catch that you feel is the expander ball coming through the case mouth. What that does is that establishes the correct diameter for your case mouth. So we've done 3 things. We knocked out the old primer, We've resized the full length of the brass, and we've also taken the diameter of the case mouth and made it to what it needs to be. Now, one thing I need to explain is in this video, all the rounds that I'm going to be making are going to be dummy rounds. They're not going to have a live primer, they're not going to have powder, they're just going to be dummy rounds. So I'll go ahead and take a second case that's already been lubed, already been fired, and I'll show that process one more time. 1, 2. And that's all there is to it, to setting up the decapping die for a rifle cartridge. Okay, now section 2, I'm going to show you how to seat a bullet. So we're going to take our bullet seating die. I already have the bullet seating stem backed all the way out, and I'm going to start to put that die into the press. I'm not going to thread it all the way down yet though. We're making dummy rounds, okay? I said that earlier. There's not going to be any primers, not going to be any powder, but in the real situation, when you're really reloading, at this point in the game, you would have a live primer and you would be fully charged. You'd have a charged case. So I'm going to insert the case into the press, and I'm going to raise the ram all the way up. I want to lower the die body down until the die touches the case mouth. So it's very similar to the first one, except I have a case in there now. Once you feel it touch the case mouth, back the die off about a half of a turn, hold the die body, and tighten the lock ring. Because this die does two functions, it'll crimp and seat. Me backing the die out that half a turn takes the crimp feature away. Lower the ram, get my bullet, and insert the bullet into the brass. Raise the ram all the way up. Nothing's going to happen probably because my bullet seating stem is backed all the way out. So I'm going to lower the bullet seating stem until I feel it touch the bullet. When I do that, I'll lower the ram slightly, maybe a half inch, 2 inches, something like that. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to give this bullet stem a couple more turns, and I'm going to seat the bullet a little bit. From here, I want to inspect the distance between the case mouth, the top of the case mouth, and the cantilever. I have quite a ways to go. So what I need to do is I need to turn the bullet seating stem clockwise. A couple of turns. 1, 2. And I can get away with like 2 full turns because of this distance is very far. Raise the ram, seat a little more. Inspect the cartridge again and see how my distance is. Go another turn or 2. Raise the ram. Now you can see that we're starting to get close to our desired overall length. So the increments that I'm going to need to make on my bullet seating stem at this point are smaller increments. If I go too far, there's a very good possibility that I'll seat the bullet too deep, and you can't take that back unless you bullet pull it. So from here I got to be careful. I'm going to go, let's say 1 full turn, because we're still a little ways away. Raise the ram and inspect the cartridge. We're getting close. Now we're really close, so I'll do maybe, I don't know, 1/4 of a turn. See how that looks. It's always okay to go a little less than you need, because you could always go more. But it's kind of like cutting a board if you're going to make a project. If you cut that board too short, it's just flat out too short now. But if you cut it a little bit too long, well, you can always go back to the saw and cut a little more off. That's the same principle I use when I come to seating my bullets. So here, that's pretty close. Let's go about 1/8 of a turn. Raise the ram. Looking pretty close. About 1/16 of a turn. Raise the ram. That looks really good. Let's zoom in and see that. Hope you can see this right here. That looks really nice. So at this point, what I would do is I would raise the ram and hold the bullet, because that will keep the bullet seating stem from turning while I lock the bullet seating stem lock nut. From here, I would be able to seat my bullets on all of my bullets. And I have a good length there. A lot of people have a question for me, and that is, do you need to crimp your bullet or not? My opinion is, if you're going to be using this bullet in a bolt action type rifle, there's no need to crimp the bullet, because when the case comes down on the decapping die and the case, what is that, expander ball comes through the case mouth here, it gives this case mouth the right diameter. So when you seat your bullet, there's enough case neck or case mouth tension to hold that bullet in place, no problem. And I'm saying in a bolt action rifle. If you're going to be using some sort of semi-auto, yeah, you might want a mild crimp on there. I shoot a lot of 223, and sometimes I crimp them, and most of the time I don't. 30-06, I hardly ever crimp them. I usually end the process on this step. But that's a little bit about crimping or not crimping. My recommendation, if it's a bolt action, there's no need for it. If it's a semi-auto, yeah, you might want to put a little crimp on it. Okay, now we have our bullet. We've got the bullet seating depth correct, and we want to put a nice little crimp on the bullet. So I'm going to insert the bullet into the press. I'm going to take my wrench and I'm going to undo the bullet seating stem lock nut, and I'm going to back out the bullet seating stem several turns. Okay. I'm also going to unlock the die lock ring and go up a couple turns with that as well. So with my round in the press, I'm going to raise the ram. Now I'm gonna use the crimp feature of the die. I'm going to thread the die down until I feel it touch the case mouth, lower the ram slightly, and go in 1/8 of a turn increments and raise the ram. I'm going to inspect the cartridge for crimp. There's not enough, so I'll turn the die body another 1/8 of a turn, raise the ram, check for crimp, getting close, 1/8 of a turn. That looks pretty close. Let's go just a little bit more, about a 1/16 of a turn, raise the ram. Let's inspect that cartridge. You can see that the cartridge has a nice little crimp on it now. And what I mean by the crimp is, I mean the walls of the case are rolled up into the cantilever, this area of the case here. Okay, you don't want to put too much crimp on a bullet, because it'll increase your pressure that bullet produces. So now I like that setting, so I'm going to go ahead and raise the ram, and what that'll do again is that'll lock the die into place so that I can lock the die lock ring. That's locking that crimp that we've just established in. It's locked in. Now let's go back to our bullet seating depth. We want to go back to the same bullet seating depth that we established earlier. So I'm going to lower the bullet seating stem down until I feel it touch the bullet. Once I feel it touch the bullet, I will lock the bullet seating stem lock nut. Okay? That die is now set to do two operations. It's set to seat the bullet and crimp the bullet in one operation. So let's pretend that this is another charged case full of powder. Of course, I just dumped it out, right? But let's pretend that's a loaded case got a primer, everything. We're going to take our bullet, and now with one stroke of the handle we will seat the bullet and crimp the bullet. One. Get my little rag here and then clean it up. That looks beautiful. So that shows you how to establish your crimp. Last thing that I like to do is take my case length gauge and drop my bullets down in there. I'm looking at this surface. I'm making sure that the bullet doesn't go too far down and that it doesn't stick up like this. If it sticks up something like this, that means I could have a headspace issue with that bullet, and I would need to probably bullet pull it and get a better piece of brass. So that looks good. Flip it over and you'll look down in this channel area, and if the brass is within this area, it's good. If it's beyond this height, the brass is going to need trimmed. But in our case, the brass looks good. These are just dummy rounds anyway, but let's look at the other one. Falls right in, the headspace is good. Flip it over. Looks good on trim. So that, my friends, is how to set up your rifle dies on a single stage press. I hope this video was useful for you. I hope you got some good information out of it, and I appreciate you watching. Feel free to subscribe, feel free to leave a comment, and again, have a good day, and thanks again, people. Bye bye now.